Restoring an old house has always been a dream of mine. My husband and I love history and have learned several trades in our 40 years of marriage and home ownership. We had been looking for an old, inexpensive house for at least a year when we happened upon this amazing stone house property in Maryland. Being from Louisiana, we knew nothing about stone construction and its needs, but it was such a great find that we bought it sight unseen and have never looked back. That was in November 2018. This is our backstory of how we discovered it, our first visit, its history, and our plan going forward. When this house came on the market, we were in a particularly busy time of life. I was in the process of painting a large home with my renovation business. My dad was needing 24-hour care with his progressing Alzheimer's, and I was waiting to hear when my daughter, who lived several states away, was going to give birth. After lying down in bed exhausted late one night, I zoned out to look at an old houses site that I hadn't looked at for several days. And what did I see but this awesome stone house in Knoxville, Maryland? Where in the world is Knoxville, Maryland? Looking at a map, I saw that it was near Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, where my husband and I had visited 15 years earlier. I loved that area for its history and beauty, but I never thought we could live there because of its proximity to expensive Washington, D.C. I checked out all of the important factors. Was it in a rundown area? I looked at Street View to make sure. Was it near a sewage facility or smelly industrial site? So far, everything checked out. The price was great, but it was up for auction, which meant that cash is required up front in order to buy it. We learned that lesson several months earlier with another house we looked at in Vermont. After that experience, we arranged our finances to make sure we had the cash accessible in case we had that scenario come up again. My husband was getting some well-deserved sleep, so I didn't tell him I had just found our future house. But as soon as he woke up, I showed him my discovery. He liked it a lot, too. I called that morning and made an offer, which wasn't much more than the starting bid. Within a couple of days, I got a call from the realtor in Maryland that we were the highest occupant bidder. Many other bids were higher, but those bids were from investors. The sellers wanted someone who was going to live in the house. We were thrilled. We got all of the paperwork and cash submitted, and the place was ours. And we hadn't even seen it yet, other than a few photos from the site. Soon I got a call from my daughter who was going into labor. I flew there and spent several days of precious time with her and my new granddaughter. Then I rented a car and drove 6 more hours away to see our new purchase. It was cold, rainy, and there were only a few leaves left on the trees, but I had already fallen in love with this place. I knew whatever it needed, we could do it. The location alone was worth more than what we paid. but our goal was to save the house and bring it back to its original glory. This region is steeped in history. Harper's Ferry, located at the confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers, is just a few miles from the stone house. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Lewis and Clark, and many others passed through this area. Young George Washington surveyed all the land across the Potomac from Maryland. Later, President Washington chose Harper's Ferry as the location of a federal arsenal. This arsenal would become a major player in the John Brown raid of 1859. This failed slave uprising helped push America to the brink of civil war. Much of this area witnessed battles during the Civil War: the Battle of Harper's Ferry and the Battle of South Mountain. Both battles were a prelude to the bloody Battle of Antietam that occurred several days later. In fact, most of the homes in this valley, including this house, were used as hospitals after that horrific battle. The historic C&O Canal and the B&O Railroad passed through the Harper's Ferry Gap at the Potomac River end of this valley. Many early valley residents worked for the B&O Railroad when it started operations in 1852, including William Norris, whom we believe built this house. After doing research, we learned that this valley was part of a land grant since the early 1700s. In the latter part of that century, the land was divided into parcels and sold. The original main road through the valley, where this house is located, had several stone houses built along it as early as 1800. This stone house property was probably built upon as early as 1845 by the William Norris and Benjamin Norris families. We believe the Norrises built the house because they also established a family cemetery up the hill from the house. At some point, the original parcel was divided between the two families because the current boundary runs through the middle of the cemetery and also through the old water well located further down the hill. So yes, we are now the caretakers of the small, stone-walled Norris Cemetery. We've learned more about the house's history as well as the history of those who dwelled here, as we've done more research and uncovered the physical layers of this house and property. More of these details will be covered in future videos.